Hey everyone, it's Kristen. So this is part 2 of Wizard 98, which is basically the best of 1998. Wizard goes into that. We talked about Batman story, No Man's Land, and Stan Lee and other things in the last last video. And now we're gonna pick up on the next part. And so I thought this was really cool because I've always really liked Alex Ross's art. I mean, he's a phenomenal artist. I mean, just amazing. So he decided that he wanted to redo George Perez's famous Crisis on Infinite Earths cover. So what he did was like, here's George Perez's artwork. There it all is. And there's like 562 characters on this cover. And this is 5 by 2 foot pencil, 5 feet by 2 feet, this whole thing. And so he first shaded it, and it says like, because Alex Ross is known for using real models in his work sometimes. Like one of his favorite things that he did was the Marvels, and it was all just kind of talking about superheroes from the perspective of a journalist, a photographer. At least I'm pretty sure he was a journalist. Anyway, and just how he saw them as opposed to like a superhero story. So it was more like a human interest story. And anyway, it was a really cool story, and his artwork was amazing. So I'll probably have to add that to my list of things to do a video on. I mean, you'll probably hear me talk about that or say that at least once every video. Like, oh, I should do a video on that. I mean, well, there's so many good things to do videos on that it's hard to pick sometimes. So first he went in with black and white and shaded it to kind of give it more definition. And then, he started coloring halfway there, and then, he finished it. I mean, look at this. Look how amazing that is. $562 characters. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I mean, it took months to do it, which I can totally imagine because it takes me, at least days to do one painting or sometimes even one drawing. So I can only understand why it would take months to do that. So this is like the burning questions for 1999. So, they're talking about, can they make Wildcats the next X-Men? So, I actually have some Wildcats issues, and I even have like a Zealot action figure because I thought they were cool. I mean, they were, just another superhero team, but they weren't like Avengers, they were more, I guess, on the same plane as X-Men in terms of being not in the public eye, not, favored by the public sort of thing. I mean, they were just doing their job, basically. Anyway, so, they didn't have as much success over the years as X-Men, of course. They had, I think, like 5 volumes, and one volume only had like one issue in it or something. And I think it ended in like 2018, I want to say, with maybe a mini series in 2022. They just, they were just never super popular. I mean, this was Jim Lee's book. He, when he formed like Wildstorm Comics, this was kind of his baby, but it didn't take off like he thought it would. It's still good. Like I have the Wildcats X-Men crossover, which I'll probably definitely do a video about that because, of course, it's X-Men, so anything with X-Men's better. And then, like, can Witchblades succeed without Michael Turner? The answer was no, not really. I mean, it unfortunately it didn't. It kind of went the same way with well, this for Witchblade, it only went from like 1995 to 2015, which is still, like a 20-year run. That's still pretty good. But it just didn't have, I guess. Well, I'm not sure what happened to it, but I guess it didn't have the fan base that they thought it would, or I remember seeing the Witchblade TV show on TNT. It only lasted one season, which it because she had the magical I want to say gauntlet. I'm pretty sure it was a gauntlet that she used. Got her powers from, but she never, of course. I've showed you pictures of Witchblade before, but she's basically has this is a cartoony version of Witchblade, but she basically has nothing on. So I guess they couldn't do that back then for TV. And when she finally did get her armor, it was like armor, like medieval armor. And I think a lot of people were just kind of turned off by that because that wasn't who she was in the comics, and that wasn't, yeah, it wasn't who she was in the comics, and she just, yeah. I mean, it was a good show. It was interesting. It just, a lot of people, I think, were disappointed that it didn't follow more closely to the comics. But, you know, I mean, back then, of course, now you have like all the shows, all the networks that can do whatever they want, basically, and all the streaming services. Of course, back then, TV, they had more restrictions. So if they made it today, I'm sure it would be super popular. And it said, has Todd McFarlane left comics? And the answer was yeah. Like I think, I mean, he has his own company, his own toy company, and he designs like all the action figures. And they're actually, I mean, they're really cool. They're really good. So he designs like all the action figures like for DC and, Spawn and all kinds of other stuff. Not Marvel, but mostly DC and other properties. But yeah, they're really cool. And then they said, what does DC have against Hal Jordan? Well, I mean, they went, well, we'll talk about that in a second because it comes up again later. Um, but it's just that they made a decision and they decided to stick with it. Even though Hal Jordan, I feel like I mean, not everyone's favorite Green Lantern, but close, especially at the time, because didn't have as many options as you have now for different Green Lanterns. But yeah. So okay, so this is, like I said, still continuing, the best of 1998. So best comic book series, they said Robin, which I was like, oh, okay. After I read, the premise of why they consider that, I was even more a little bit confused. So basically, Robin is, Tim Drake. He took up over after Jason Todd was killed by Joker. Um, it. I mean, one of my favorite DC animated movies is Under the Red Hood. If you have not seen that, it talks, of course, you should read the comic books because, of course, they're always better. But that movie, like, okay, I will say DC does animated movies really, really well. Animated movies and series, whereas Marvel, it seems to do better with live action. I mean, not Marvel doesn't always hit the nail on the head all the time because there have been definitely a few misses. Like, I don't know if you remember the very short-lived Inhumans series on ABC. That was pretty bad. I mean, it was really cool to see the characters and Lockjaw was on it. And of course, he's really cool to see, really fun. But it just wasn't there. The chemistry between the actors just wasn't there, and yeah. So they don't always do live action better, but for the most part, I think they do a little bit better than DC. Anyway, Tim Drake. So he basically, when Jason Todd dies, tries to convince Dick Grayson, the original Robin, to go back to being Batman's Robin, because even though he's Nightwing now, because Tim said Batman needs a Robin. And of course, Nightwing refused. He's like, I've moved on. And so, because basically Tim was supposedly in the audience the night that Dick's parents died, and he figured out who Batman was and Robin. So he basically offered to be the next Robin. And so he became the next Robin. And he's like, I think they said a sophomore in high school at this point. And so this is spoiler, Stephanie Brown. And she's called that because her father's a criminal, and she dons this costume in order to spoil his plans. So she's named Spoiler. And anyway, so basically, the whole thing has a lot of teenage drama in it. The whole series. Robin's like dating this girl, and he kind of forms a connection with Stephanie, though. Spoiler. But he, at the same time, never tells her who he is because he doesn't want to betray Batman's secret. Because, of course, if he told her who he was, then it'd be pretty easy to figure out who Batman was. So they just know each other, as she just knows him as Robin. She doesn't know him as, Tim Drake. So a week after they start dating, because his girlfriend goes off to an all-girls school, so he's like, well, okay, I guess we're not dating anymore. So a week after their first date, Spoiler tells him she's pregnant. No, it's not his. And there's this thing where, his first girlfriend comes back, and he has to choose between her and Spoiler, and he chooses Spoiler, and he makes up this persona so that he can accompany Spoiler to Lamaze classes and like birthing classes. And it seems like I said, teenage drama, kind of a mess a little bit, but they, says best book series. And, basically, Stephanie Brown, she becomes Batgirl, like, at one point, but when Barbara Gordon comes back as Batgirl, like, Stephanie Brown basically just kind of fades into the background. You don't really hear about her, like, hardly ever. Anyway, so they said Wildcats is the next comic book to keep your eye on. Okay, so they said the best hero was Thor, and I'm not going to explain all of it again. Why, he's what was going on with him in this period of comics. If you'll see my video on Wizard casting the Thor movie, it'll tell you almost everything you need to know about that. But basically now he's immortal and he has to deal with mortal problems while still being like a superhero. So that's why they think he's the best hero. And they said Daredevil is the one to keep your eye on. Okay. So this guy is the best villain. He's from Preacher, and I couldn't get into that series. I mean, it's just very, very gritty, very what's the word for it? Very violent, very I don't even know how to say it, but I just couldn't get into that. I mean, yeah. I tried to watch, I remember it had like an AMC series, and I watched one episode and I was just like, nope, can't do it. Nope, just too much for me. I mean, so if you're interested in like a really, I mean, the premise is cool, but I was just like, nope, can't do it. And then they said the best writer, Garth Ennis, which he wrote Preacher, which, they said he's known for his ultra violence. And he also is really good at pacing the story. Like he'll, have a rapid pace and then stop, and he just, he's really good at that. Like I said, nope, couldn't read Preacher, but that's just me because that's who I am. I'm more for lighter stories. They said George Perez was the best artist. There's some of his work, and we just talked about him in the last video because he did or was it this video? I think it was this video where he did the the DC Crisis on Infinite Earths, 562 character spread. He was, the original artist behind that. Yeah. So, I mean, that in itself is amazing. And he's really known for like his detail. His work on Avengers is like iconic, especially now. So they had the best slugfest being Wolverine versus Marrow. In X-Men 72. Okay, so we're just gonna briefly go over this since it's X-Men. So you can see right on the front. Okay, so Marrow, if you don't know, or Marrow, again, pronunciation, it's bane of my existence. um, she is an ex-Morlock. We'll just call her Sarah because that's her name. She is an ex-Morlock. Well, she's still a Morlock, but she used to be like in the Storm series, Storm miniseries. She was a member of Gene Nation, which was like an ultra-violent offshoot of the Morlocks, and she was the leader. And basically, which I had never like when I read that series, I was shocked. Like, because Storm, of course, she beat Callisto for, you know, in order to rule the Morlocks, but she didn't kill her. And then in Storm, the limited series, she actually tore out Marrow's heart. Um, because Marrow pushed her to that point because she had like a bomb strapped to it or something. And I was just remember reading that at the time and thinking, holy cow, wow, I could never imagine Storm doing something like that. And luckily though, because Marrow has this, she has uncontrollable bone growth. Like it just grows random a lot of times. She uses like these as weapons. See, she took one of the bones out of her and is using it as a weapon. So she has two hearts apparently, and that's how she survived her heart being ripped out by Storm. Anyway, so we come in on her actually because Callisto's like always been a mentor to her, and during Operation Zero Tolerance with the humanoid like Sentinels, she was gravely injured. So Callisto told Marrow to go to the X-Men. So she did, and so Storm and Cannonball in this issue, like we're gonna skip over some parts. They argue about how to deal with her because they have opposite viewpoints. One, Storm thinks it's a great idea for Wolverine to be her mentor and kind of six Wolverine on her, so to speak. And Cannonball thinks that they should be more gentle, more caring with her. Anyway, she's still a very, very, very angry young woman. So you see them, Wolverine and Marrow arguing. Like I said, I'm going to call her Sarah because I keep messing up. You see them arguing, and he's like, if you're going to live here, you need to play by our rules. And she's like, we both know why you're here. You're not here to persuade me to be a good little girl. You're here, to basically deal with me because Storm doesn't want to. So, and we see like a, appearance of Celia Reeves and Maggot, just, briefly in there. But like I said, this issue is all about Wolverine and versus Sarah. So you have these two panels. 2 pages, and they're continuing their fight. And basically, Sarah's like, you know, well, Wolverine questions why she even wants to be in the X-Men because, I mean, she's a killer, she's a terrorist, and you know, basically she's like, well, my birthright is to rise out of the Morlock tunnels and basically, exchanged a human life for, for every mutant life that's killed, a human life must be owed, basically. And she's like, I don't understand why you would stay, with Xavier and why you believe the way that you do. Um, and I mean, my people, Sarah, had to endure the barest of human existence. We were forced to live in the tunnels. And Wolverine's like, maybe we're talking about different Morlocks because at least, if nothing else, I know that the Morlocks had dignity, and you're a disgrace to them. Like I said, we're skipping over stuff because Marrow gets in it. Sarah gets in a good shot, and she actually licks the blood off of her hand, Wolverine's blood. Just weird. And she was like, I am hate. I'm full of hate. I will always win. Hate will always win. And, she's like, unless you extinguish me for good, it's always like the hate's always going to come back. That's who I am. That's who I'm always going to be. And Wolverine's like, I don't kill little girls. Like, I kill soldiers. You must want something else. You must want something better. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come here. And that's what Wolverine says. So basically, he gets her down and he extends his hand to her, to help her out because, fight's over. Like, he's not gonna kill her. He's not gonna hurt her. And she's like, because he's like, second chances. I'm giving you a second chance to do the right thing. And she's like, no thanks, and just stabs him through the throat with one of her bones, like her bone shards. I mean, holy cow! Think talk about kind of unexpected. And of course, if Wolverine was anyone else, if he didn't have his healing factor, he would be dead. And he lets out this blood curdling scream that can be heard all through the mansion. And basically, he's consumed with this bloodlust and this rage. And you can see him, like, centimeters away from actually, like, gouging out her eyes and stuff. And then here comes Cannonball, and he basically grabs Wolverine and pulls him off of her. And if he hadn't done that, Sarah probably wouldn't have survived. So yeah, like I said, it's an intense battle, and so I'm glad that in one that you kind of didn't see coming, like, yeah, like Wolverine said, why would she be at the mansion if she didn't want something better for herself? Oh, and I forgot to show you the last page. I almost forgot. See this last little panel. She goes back to Callisto, and Callisto's like, Sarah? And she's like, yes, it's me. How are you feeling? And she's like, I'm okay. I'll be back on my feet soon. And she asks, so how's school today, dear? And Sarah says, it was fine, Callisto. I'm making friends. And Callisto said, that's a good girl, Sarah. Good girl. Which, that's just like the cherry on top of that. I mean, I'm like, wow, okay. She just totally straight up lied. Or, I mean, like I said, I think with Sarah, the thing about her is she hates being a Morlock. She doesn't mind being a mutant, but she hates being a Morlock. She wants to be one of the pretty people, so to speak. She hates that she has to hide who she is because, of course, her bone growth is uncontrollable, so she can't hide or she can't walk around, among humans like, other mutants can. So I think that's a big part of why she is so angry. She resents the fact that she's regulated to the tunnels. She doesn't get to enjoy the sun, so to speak, that other mutants get to just because she was born like with this, this like deformity. And also like the bones growing uncontrollably. It's painful. I mean, her to an extent, she has a healing factor, not as extensive as Wolverine, of course, but she has a healing factor because she otherwise, thinking about bones like growing out of your forehead and your face and growing out of your back and just growing everywhere, that would hurt. That would hurt. So she has. I mean, it is painful, but she has to have some kind of healing factor. Otherwise, like the pain would just be too much. Like she wouldn't be able to take it. So, okay. Anyway, like I said, there's a lot to get to in this issue or this issue of Wizard. So we're going to continue next time with the best moment of 1998. And it's something we kind of touched on in one of the earlier, but yeah, it's definitely one of those moments where you're like, oh, wow. Okay, so I hope you join me for the next video. Until then, bye.